Hi, and welcome to this section of the tutor where we're going to talk about a very important section in math, and that's called fractions, okay? Fractions can sometimes seem difficult because they don't look exactly like real numbers, okay? And they can seem to be a little bit challenging at first, but I promise you if you stick with me, I'll teach you what a fraction is. And in this section, we're going to learn what a fraction is, and we're also going to learn how to, what we call simplify fractions, and that'll all make sense at the end of this section. And then we'll go in later on and we'll learn how to add them and subtract them and all that good stuff, okay? But first, let's talk about what is a fraction. It's a very important topic, so let's go in and talk about that right away. I'm going to use pi as an example all the time in this class, okay? So I hope you guys like pi because we're going to talk a lot about pi's right now. I think everybody knows what 3 pi's would look like, right? You'd have 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi. These are circles, and each one of these is a pi, okay? So I think you can visualize in your head what 3 pi's would look like. So just hold that in your head for a second, okay? I think you could also visualize what 2 pi's looks like in your head. That would be 2 giant pi's, right? I love pi myself, and having 2 pi's is even better than having 1 pi. I think you also would know what 1 pi looks like, which would just be 1 circle, okay? But the question is, 3 pi's, 2 pi's, 1 pi, what happens when you start cutting the pie up, okay? What do you call those pieces of the pie? Because if the pie is one whole giant circle, we call that a pie, and you start cutting into that pie, well, if you start eating some of the pie, then what you have left over isn't going to be a whole pie, right? It's going to be something less than a pie. It's going to be a part of the pie, but it's not going to be a whole pie. And what we're going to say is that you're going to have something left over, you know, when you cut out there, and you're going to have some pieces left over. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about fractions. You have a fraction of the pie left. You have something less than 1, okay? So basically, anytime you have something less than 1, you can talk about it in terms of a fraction, because that's what it is. A fraction is used to talk about things when you're talking about less than 1 of them, okay? So 3 pi's, 2 pi's, 1 pi, we're going to start cutting the pies up, and then we're going to have less than 1 pi, and we're going to have a fraction. So let's say we have, this is our whole pie here, okay? This is our whole pie. Actually, let me go ahead and erase this real quick. I'll make it clearer. Here's our whole pie right here. We said this was 1 pi, okay? Now, let's say for some reason I cut this pie down the middle, like this, okay? And I take this half over here, and I give it to my dog, okay? So my dog eats it. He loves pie, okay? Well, I have some pie left, right? How much pie do I have? I think you can probably realize, or most of you have heard the term half of something. If I take this pencil and I break it in half, and I cut it right in the middle, right? Well, I've taken this pie and I've cut it down the middle, and so we've taken away half of the pie. And what we have left, we have half of a pie left. Now, how do you write that down? Well, you can say that this is half of a pie, okay? Half of a pie, and that's absolutely true. But in math, you want to write this stuff down in terms of a number, right? So you can also write it down like this. Once I first cut the pie, I had 2 pieces, right? So I'm going to say I had 2 pieces here. But when I take 1 pie and I throw it to my dog, how many pieces do I have left? I only have 1 piece. So this is called 1/2, okay? I just take a 1, which is how many pieces I'm talking about, okay? Or if, in this case, how many pieces I'm talking about here, okay? Out of 2 possible pieces, okay? And this is what I have. And you just draw this line in the middle, and this just means it's a fraction. It's just telling you that you have less than 1, okay? So I don't have a whole pie. I have half of a pie. The top number tells you how many pieces that you have, and the bottom number tells you how many total pieces you have. So this is how you can talk about things less than 1. I take this, I throw it away, okay? So how many do I have left? Well, I have 1 piece out of a possible 2 pieces. So I don't have both pieces. That would be a whole pie. I don't have both pieces. That would be a whole pie. I threw 1 piece away. I have 1 piece left out of a possible 2 pieces. So I have half a pie. This is called 1/2, okay? Now, what would happen if I took the pie, okay, And what if I cut it up like this? What if I cut it down like this and then across like this? Okay? And let's say I'm going to eat some of this pie. I like pie, okay? So let's say I take this piece here and I just take this piece out of the pie tray and I eat it. And that's the only piece that I eat. How much pie have I eaten? That's my question, okay? Well, this is called a quarter of a pie. So this is quarter of a pie. And you might have even heard about that before. You may have heard that word, a quarter of this, a quarter of that. But in math, how would you write it? I've got one piece in my mouth out of a possible total of 4 pieces. So there's 4 pieces available because I cut it to make 4 pieces, right? But I'm only eating one piece. So the piece that I took is 1/4 or 1/4. It's the same thing, okay? So this is how you write it. You're talking about fractions here. That's exactly what this is. These are both a fraction. This is a fraction, this is a fraction. Now, obviously, this is more pie than this, right? So this fraction, 1/2, is more than 1/4. Now, it's not so easy to see that here by looking at the numbers, but by looking at the pictures, this is a whole lot more pie than this, okay? All right. Now, what I want to show you next is, what if I look at this half a pie in a little bit different way? Okay? We just talked about what a half is, and we just talked about what a quarter is, okay? What if I took this pie, okay, here's my pie, and I cut it right down the middle in half, okay? And I'm going to use blue here because I like blue. And I take this half away, okay? How much have I taken away, okay? This is 1/2 of a pie because I've taken one piece away out of a possible 2 pieces. That's 1/2 of the pie, okay? Now, hold that in your brain. We're going to talk about this for a second. What if I have another pie and I cut it again just like in the previous board like this, okay? But I don't just take one piece of this pie away. I take 2 pieces away. So I'm going to take all of this. I'm going to take 2 pieces of pie and I've cut it into 4 pieces. So how much have I taken away here, okay? Here, okay, there was 4 pieces, okay, and I took 2 of them. So I took 2 pieces, 1, 2, out of 1, 2, 3, 4 total pieces, okay? That is a fraction. So anytime you write a fraction down, the top number is how many pieces do you have, and the bottom number is how many total pieces are there, period, okay? So you have 2/4 here, okay? Now what I want to show you, and this is very, 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 very important, okay, is that this looks different than this, okay? These 2 fractions look different because I've written them down. This has a 2, this has a 1, this has a 4, this has a 2. They look different. But look at the pictures for a second, okay? Even though I've taken 2 pieces out of 4 over here, and even though I've taken 1 piece out of 2 over here, the total amount of pie that I eat in each case is the same. So in other words, these 2 fractions, even though they look different, are the same thing. They're no different from one another. They are exactly the same thing. I cut the pie in 2 pieces, I eat half the pie. If I cut this pie into 4 pieces and then take 2 away, I've eaten the same amount of pie. It is exactly the same thing. They only look to be different, okay? They only look to be different. So, these 2 things must be equal. They must be equal, and they are equal. They're exactly equal, okay? 1/2 is equal to 2/4, 2/4. It must be this way, okay? Why is it this way, okay? Well, I'm going to go ahead and show you that 1/2 is equal to 2/4, exactly equal to. Why is that? Because what you can do is you can take this fraction and you can do what we call simplify it. Fractions are cool because they're kind of like a seesaw. You see, on a seesaw, you put one person on one side, you put one person on the other side, okay? And if you're going to balance that seesaw that's over here, you're going to balance that seesaw, right? So if you put some bricks on one side, if you're going to keep it balanced, you're going to have to put some bricks on the other side. So in order to keep the seesaw balanced, you can do the same thing to each side of the seesaw. Add some over here, add some over here. add some more, add some more. You can do the same thing to each side of the seesaw and it stays balanced, okay? A fraction is the same way. I can do whatever I want to the top and I can do whatever I want to the bottom. As long as I do it to both, then I have the same fraction, okay? So tell me, if I start out with a 2 on the top and a 4 on the bottom, okay, what happens if I divide the top by 2? And what happens if I divide the bottom also by 2? I've done the same thing to the top and the same thing by the bottom, okay? What is 2 divided by 2? Well, that's 1, because anything divided by itself is 1. What is 4 divided by 2? Well, that's simply 2, okay? So notice what we've done. I've taken the 2/4, I've done the same thing to the top and the bottom, and I have arrived at a different fraction. And look at this, it's the same fraction as this one. So we've arrived at 1/2. So what I'm trying to tell you is, we started with 2/4, and that looked like it was a totally different fraction. The picture seems to make it seem like they're the same, but what we proved, though, is that by dividing the top by 2 and dividing the bottom by 2, we got the same fraction. We have simplified that fraction. We have reduced that fraction into its lowest terms, okay? There's nothing else you can divide the top and the bottom to make that any simpler, okay? You just, anytime you have a fraction, and you're going to have problems like this where you have to simplify fractions, go ahead and see if you can divide the top and the bottom by the same number, and then you can simplify it as far down as you can go. And you can go from there. So let's go ahead and do some more problems. And let's go ahead and draw some more fractions and continue to introduce fractions, and let's simplify those fractions. And I think you'll see that it's not that hard. Okay? It's not that hard. What if you have, okay, what if you have a problem like this? Here's my pi, and I'm going to draw this, and I'm going to ask you what the fraction is. Okay? Here's my pi, and I'm only going to take this much of it. Question is, what is the fraction represented by this? Okay? First thing you have to ask is, how many pieces do you have, and how many total pieces are there? Okay? You have one piece, so the 1 goes on the top, okay? And the bottom number is, how many pieces do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total pieces, so it's 6. So this is a fraction called 1/6, okay? It's just a fraction. It's just telling you that you don't have a whole pie, you have 1/6 of a pie, one piece out of 6 pieces. So you don't have a whole pie, you just have a piece of a pie, okay? So let's do it again. Let's do it again. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to draw like this, and I'm going to cut this pie up into 6 pieces, okay? And then, I'm not going to take one piece, I'm going to take 2 pieces. So here we go. Here's one piece of the pie I took, here's another piece of the pie I took. Okay, what fraction are we dealing with here? Again, the first thing you do is, how many pieces do I have? That's 2 pieces. And how many total pieces are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. 2/6, okay? Okay, now, 2/6, okay? Now, the question is, this is correct, this is the fraction, but anytime you have a fraction, you're going to need to always check, and your problems are going to ask you to reduce the fraction into lowest terms, okay? So the question is, can you do anything to the top of this fraction and the bottom of this fraction to make it any simpler? Can you divide the top by a number and the bottom by the same number and do that successfully to the top and the bottom and make this fraction any simpler? And I say that you can, because if you take the top and divide it by 2, and you take the bottom and you also divide it by 2, you will get 2 divided by 2 is 1. The bottom is 6 divided by 2, and that is 3, because 3 times 2 is 6. Okay? So this is what we call simplest form, simplest terms. It's reduced, okay? Because you can't divide the top by anything and the bottom by anything else and make this fraction any simpler. You can't do that, because you've got a 1 and a 3. You just can't do anything more. What this tells you is that the fraction 2/6 is exactly the same as the fraction 1/3. They are exactly the same. There's no difference. They just look a little bit different. It's written a little bit differently, but the fraction is the same. It's kind of like if I give you a dollar bill, okay? That's $1. And I give you 4 quarters, okay? That's $1, okay? You've got the dollar. You can only buy so many candy bars with it. but one of them is 4 quarters and one of them is a piece of paper, the dollar bill. But they're the same thing. Same thing here. 2/6 is the same as 1/3. Now, in order to prove ourselves of that, let's figure out what that would look like if we were to draw it. Here's a pie, and I want to divide that pie up into 3 equal pieces. 3 equal pieces, okay? 3 equal pieces. And from these 3 pieces, I'm going to take 1 piece off the top, okay? So what fraction would this be? Well, I've got 1 piece out of 3 equal pieces. So this is what we call the fraction 1/3. Notice that it looks exactly the same as this over here. I'm showing you by drawing that 1/3 is exactly the same thing as 2/6, even though they look a little bit different when you write the numbers down. This is why you can reduce it and it is the same thing. Here you have 2 pieces out of 6, here you have 1 piece out of 3, but the same amount of pie goes into your tummy in each case, okay? All right, good. We're going to go ahead and continue working more of these fractions and simplifying fractions, and we're going to get the hang of it by working through a lot of problems, okay? So, what if I had a fraction, or a pie, I should say, that looks something like this? I'm going to divide it up into 6 pieces, like I usually do, okay? But in this case, I'm going to take 1 piece here, another piece here, and another piece here. Okay, 3 pieces. Okay, what fraction would this be? I've got 1, 2, 3 pieces out of a total possible of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. 6 pieces. Okay, question you always have to ask yourself, even though this is correct, this is exactly right, can you reduce this fraction? Okay, can you reduce this fraction? I say you can, because on the top you can divide by 3, and the bottom you can divide by 3, and they'll both divide evenly. 3 divided by 3 is 1, okay, on the top. 6 divided by 3 is 2 on the bottom. So what we're claiming here is 3/6 is the same thing as 1/2, because we can divide top and bottom by the same thing, and we'll get something a whole lot simpler, and we can't do anything more to this. We can't simplify that anymore. Well, let's go ahead and check and see if this makes sense. If I look at 1/2, I would say, well, let me divide this pie into 2 pieces, 2 pieces total, and I'm going to eat one of those 2 pieces. Now you can see this amount of pie is exactly the same as this amount of pie. Even though it looks a little different, 3/6, it looks a little different than 1/2. It's the same amount of pie in each case, and that's because I can reduce this fraction. So you're going to have a lot of problems that are going to tell you, make this fraction in lowest terms, reduce this fraction, that kind of stuff, okay? And it's not terribly difficult. You're just going to have to take it slowly. Let's take another example. Let's say you have a pie. I'm going to divide it into 8 pieces, like this. And I'm going to take away, because I'm kind of hungry, 1 piece. How would you write that fraction? Okay. Well, I've got 1 piece of pie out of a possible of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of pie. So this is the fraction. It's called 1/8. Can you reduce this fraction anymore? No, you can't, because you can't divide the top and the bottom by anything different or anything else and make it any simpler, because the only thing divides into 1 is 1. So you really can't do that. But let's look separately over here, and let's say, what would this be? I'm going to divide this fraction, I'm going to divide this pie again into 8 pieces, okay? And I'm going to take 2 of those pieces. Here's a piece for me, and here's a piece for my friend. Taking 2 pieces. What fraction of the pie do I have in this case? I've got 2 pieces, okay, out of a total possible 8 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces, like this, okay? 2/8, okay? Now, can I reduce this fraction? I say yes, you can, because you can divide the top by 2, and you can divide the bottom by 2. This is where multiplication and division become very, very important, because I know that 2 divided by 2 is just going to give me 1, and 8 divided by 2 is going to give me 4. So I can reduce this fraction by dividing the top and the bottom by the same number, and I get 1/4. So what we're saying here is that the fraction 2/8 is exactly the same as the fraction 1/4. Let's see if that's true. Let's draw another pie over here, and let's divide it into 4 pieces. And let's go ahead and take this and see if it makes sense. Okay? Here is my piece of the pie that I take right here. Okay? 1 piece out of 4. Now you can see, even though this is kind of rotated, that this pie, this total amount of pie, is equal to this total amount of pie right here. So they are indeed exactly equal to one another. Okay? So this fraction over here is going to be 1/4. So what I'm showing you by drawing is that 1/4 is equal to 2/8. Okay? So what we're showing here is, and you're not going to be drawing these pies on your test, but I'm showing you by drawing that you can take a fraction and you can reduce it and you get the same representation of the pie, but it just looks a little bit different. Okay? We're going to do one more of these examples with the drawing business, and then we're going to kind of simplify some fractions without drawing them. Okay? So let's say you have, again, I'm going to draw this pie, and I'm going to make 8 pieces. Okay? There's 4, 5, 6 pieces, 7, 8 pieces of pie, and I'm going to take 3 of those pieces. So here's 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 pieces of the pie. Okay? 3 pieces of the pie. So 1, 2, 3 pieces of pie out of a total of 8 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. Okay? All right. Now, let's go ahead and here and see what something a little bit different looks like. Let's see, I have 8 pieces of pie again, and let's go ahead and take 4 pieces. Now notice in this case I couldn't simplify it anymore because I can't divide the top and the bottom by the same number that's going to make this any simpler. I can't divide by 2 here because it won't go into 3 an even number of times. I can't divide by 3 because if I divide by 3 on the top, well, 8 divided by 3, it doesn't give you an even number either. So you really can't simplify that one anymore. But let's go over here and let's take 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 piece, 4 piece, and let's see what happens. This fraction is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces out of a total of 8. Again, it's the same 8 pieces. Okay? Can you simplify this fraction? Yes, you can, because you can divide the top by 4, and you can divide the bottom, again, by 4. Okay? And when you do that, you'll see that 4 divided by 4 gives you 1, and 8 divided by 4 gives you 2. So what we're saying here is that 4/8 is exactly the same thing as 1/2, and it's because it is this way because I can divide the top and the bottom by the same number, and as long as I do the same thing at the top and the bottom, I'm okay. Now let's draw this and see if that's true. I take my pie, divide it into 2 pieces, and I take 1 piece home. That's this piece here. This is 1/2 of the pie. This is 1/2 of the pie. Even though 4/8 looked a little bit different, it is indeed the same. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to practice simplifying fractions because that's going to be a big part of your homework. And then, but we're not going to draw pictures here. We're just going to simplify the fractions. So the question is simplify the following fractions. 5/10. Can you simplify that? Yes, you can, because you can divide the top by 5 and you can divide the bottom by 5. Okay? So on the top, what you're going to have is 5 divided by 5 is 1. The bottom, 10 divided by 5, is going to give you 2. And you can't do anything more with that because that's fully simplified. You can't divide the top and the bottom by the same thing and get anything simpler. 5/10 is equal to 1/2. Now let's say you have 8/16. Can you simplify this? And I say yes, you can, because you can divide the bottom by the top by 8 and the bottom also by 8. Okay? And when you do that, 8 divided by 8 is going to give you 1. 16 divided by 8 is going to give you 2 because 8 times 2 gives you 16. Okay? Now let's try another problem. Let's say you have 2/4. Can you simplify this? And I say yes, you can, because you can divide the top by 2 and the bottom also by 2. Okay? And when you do that, the top is going to be 2 divided by 2 is going to give you 1. But the bottom is going to be 4 divided by 2 is going to give you 2. Now I picked these three examples on purpose because they all reduce to 1/2. What I'm saying here is that this fraction looks different than this fraction, looks different than this fraction, but they're all the same thing. And if you were to draw the pies here, you would see that if you draw 5 out of 10, 8 out of 16, 2 out of 4, when you shade it all, it's going to all look like half the pie, okay? So you need to be real careful in fractions to make sure that they're simplified so that you really understand what it means, so you can go ahead and add, subtract, and all that stuff that we're going to learn about later. Now let's say you had, getting into this a little bit more, just simplifying, let's say you have 3 divided by 15. This is 3/15, 3 pieces out of 15 possible pieces. Okay, how would you simplify this? Well, you can simplify this because you can divide the top by 3 and the bottom by 3. And when you do that, 3 divided by 3 is 1. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Because 3 times 5 is 15. So 3/15 is equal to 1/5. Okay? Let's take 5/15. It's very similar. Can you do that? Well, you can divide the top by 5 and the bottom also by 5, and those will both divide evenly with no remainder, which is what you're trying to do. 5 divided by 5 gives you 1. 15 divided by 5 gives you 3. So that reduces to 1/3. So if you were to draw 5/15 and 1/3, they would look the same. Okay? What if you had 10/15? Okay? How would you do that? Well, you're trying to find a number that you can divide the top and the bottom evenly. So I'm going to pick 5 because I know 5 goes into 10 and I know 5 goes into 15. Okay? So 10 divided by 5 gives me 2. 15 divided by 5 gives me 3. And I can't reduce that anymore. So that is all simplified. Okay? 10/15 is equal to 2/3. Okay? Let's do a couple more here. Getting a little bit bigger numbers here. What if you had 18 divided by 36? 18/36. That's a fraction, 18 over 36. Well, let's go ahead and, I'm not sure what the proper answer is, but I know that 9 goes into 18. So let me go ahead and do by 9. I also know that 9 goes into 36. Okay, so let's go ahead and see where that leaves us. 18 divided by 9 gives me 2, because 9 times 2 is 18. Okay, 36 divided by 9 is going to give me 4, because 9 times 4 is 36. Okay, now I'm left with a fraction that I can further simplify, okay, because I can divide the top again by 2 and the bottom again by 2. And that is going to give me 1/2, because 2 divided by 2 gives me 1, 4 divided by 2 gives me 2. So notice that you just pick the first number you can that's going to divide evenly, and then if you're left with something else that you can further work with, do it again. Pick a different number, and then you'll eventually arrive at something that you can't simplify anymore. Finally, what if I had 25 over 100, 25 1/100ths? Well, what can I divide here? I just happen to know that I can divide by 25, and I can divide by 25. And so 25 divided by 25 is 1. 100 divided by 25, I know, just goes 4 times. So that's equal to 1/4. So fraction is basically a part of a whole. It is a representation of something when you have less than 1, less than a whole pie, less than 1 of something. And just because the fractions might look different doesn't mean that they may not be equal, so you have to do this thing called simplification, which is just taking a look at the top and the bottom and dividing the same number into each till you get to something that you can't simplify anymore. Practice this. Practice is very important. Fractions are used everywhere. Practice, and I promise you that you'll get the hang of it.